Good morning. Let's try that one more time. Good morning. Welcome to our third annual OBGYN Med Ed Day. We're really honored that you've joined us this morning in person and for those who are with us virtually. As we start all of our grand rounds, we'd like to start with our land acknowledgement. We'd like to acknowledge the Ramaytush Ohlone people who are the traditional custodians of this land. We pay our respect to the Ramaytush Ohlone elders, past, present, and future, who call this place the land that UCSF sits upon, their home. We are proud to continue their tradition of coming together and growing as a community. We thank the Ramaytush Ohlone community for their stewardship and support, and we look forward to strengthening our ties as we continue our relationship of mutual respect and understanding. As residents of the Bay Area, we can deepen our commitment to this process by contributing financially in the spirit of reparations and land repatriation. And you can see the links here on the screen. And for those of you on Zoom, Patrick will post them into the chat. I also always begin with gratitude. And so I'd like to extend a special thanks to Patrick and Alexis for making today possible. Patrick and Alexis go above and beyond every day to support the educational mission of our department. And I wish to celebrate again their recognition along with Mary Beth as recipients of the Jacqueline Witt Bowden Award for their outstanding contributions in support of health professions education. And as a reminder to us all, OBGYN Med Ed Day started as an opportunity for our department to come together and collectively engage in faculty development around medical education. The vast majority of faculty choose to work at UCSF because of their deep commitment to medical education. It offers us the opportunity to learn how to be better educators, more impactful mentors, and more ardent sponsors for our students, residents, and fellows with whom we are privileged to work. For the learners, I hope you can see the faculty engaging today in their attempts to be better for you and in their efforts to hone their skills and make tangible improvements that will positively affect your learning and growth. And now it's my true privilege to introduce our grand round speaker, Dr. Kerri Palamara. Dr. Palamara is an associate professor of medicine at the Harvard Medical School and a primary care internist at Massachusetts General Hospital. She serves as the Department of Medicine's Assistant Medical Director of Wellbeing for Mass General Brigham and co-leads the MGB Elevate Physician Leadership Program. She's a national expert on physician coaching, clinician well-being, leadership development, and thriving teams. She directs the MGH Physician Coaching Program and the American College of Physicians Physician Peer Coach Training Program, helping expand the coaching program to many, many GME training programs and professional societies nationwide. She's a board member of CHARM and co-leads its GME Wellbeing Leader CME course. She has been and is currently involved in multiple randomized control trials locally and nationally on the impact of coaching. Deservedly, she has been honored with awards from MGH, Partners Healthcare, Harvard Medical School, the Society of General Internal Medicine, and the American College of Physicians. We're truly honored that she accepted our invitation to come to UCSF and to share with us her expertise. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Palamara.
All right. I'm on, Patrick. Okay, good. I'm really excited to be here. It's been a great, I second gratitude to Patrick. He's awesome. It's been a blast to be here. I'd like to say I brought the nice weather from Boston to you guys, but maybe we're all just having a really nice fall. And I love talking about this stuff with you all, and for all the faculty in the room. Hopefully what we learn a little bit about today can start to transform your conversations. And for those of you who will be in the workshop later, we'll sort of do a deeper dive into that. And for the trainees, a lot of what we're talking about today is the work that it definitely will carry with you throughout your experience into becoming faculty, will help you in the ways that you think about your own experiences, the way you work with medical students, other learners, actually coaching up to faculty. So hopefully everyone will be able to have some nugget that they can take away that starts to change the way we listen and think and interact with others. It is grand rounds. I'll share a little bit of data, but mostly what I'm going to do is share about the concepts and the ways in which that we've applied them over time. So a lot of it is really thinking about what is coaching. And I know, particularly in a place like this, there's a lot of coaching that happens, and definitions really matter. So we'll talk about that. And then actually, like, how does it work? And then how has it worked in terms of outcomes, and thinking about what you can take away from it. And I think a really important place to start is actually thinking about differentiating wellness from well-being and considering how this interacts together and what the role of coaching is in that. And so these words are used interchangeably often, and there actually is a big difference. And when you think about your wellness, the way that I think about it is that, like, your wellness is a lot to do with how what the decisions you make, the health that you have, how you prioritize certain things. And your employer, your organization has a role in that, but you're primarily the ones making the largest decisions that impact that. But your well being, you can't single handedly be in charge of your own well being. Your organization needs to play a role in supporting your well being. So it's much more than how do you sleep, how do you eat, how healthy are you, and how's your mental health, and really what are the teams that you're in, how are your teams supported to thrive, how are people communicating with each other, how do we express value, how do we feel value, how do we feel appreciated, and how are we all supported in thriving and finding meaning and purpose. And so that those two concepts are really different. And so they're both important. They both relate to each other. You can't really have well-being without a sense of wellness. But it's really the onus shifts when you start to move up this pyramid from wellness to well-being, from the individual to the organization. And you might ask, well, aren't you here talking about what, like, one person can do and talking to another? But what I think is really important is that when you can take coaching skills and start to infuse them into a culture, you start to support the communication that takes these top three parts and really and starts to turn that into a coaching culture, and a culture of mutual respect, and a culture where people feel valued and seen and heard and appreciated. And that's a lot of, like, you can assign someone to coach a person, but if everyone is thinking about these concepts and using them, you can really start to change how teams and groups and organizations interact with each other. And so that's where this concept of professional well-being comes into play. And the idea, so when you think about, like, general well-being, like the WHO will describe general well-being as being happy or healthy, and you're like, I don't really necessarily think of, it's hard for me to picture that when I think about work. And so when you think about professional well-being, it's like, am I being set up to thrive? Do I have meaning in my work, purpose in my work? Do I show up and I'm excited to be there? Do my days fly by? Do I feel like I am making a difference in the environments that I'm in? Do I have a good work-related quality of life? Those are all concepts that factor into professional well-being. And that is really the goal. For many years, our focus has been on eliminating burnout. But actually, if you look back at, like, JAMA perspectives from, like, whenever JAMA started, it's you have people talking about staying up all night writing in charts that are taking up their office in their house. You have, and we sort of have this idea that in the old days before Epic, everything was fine, but actually that's, like, not true. Like, Epic is part of the problem. Just to be clear, I agree with that statement, but, like, that this actually, there's a little bit of burnout that will probably always exist, because what we do is hard and we really care about it, and people need us, and being needed by people, like, at times of great need, takes a lot out of us. And sometimes we can fill that back up, and sometimes we aren't able to right away. And so burnout can happen, and it doesn't mean that some major failure has happened from an employer or individual, but it's when that's sustained over time that's really the problem. And so, and you'll even see in different studies, like burnout, like if you ask people how burned out they are and you ask them in the last 2 weeks versus if you ask them over the course of their life, you'll see, like, wildly different answers from the same person. And so burnout is, in my mind, no longer the goal of what we're trying to eliminate here. It's actually, if we can help people feel fulfilled and have professional well-being, burnout won't actually matter in the same way it feels like it matters right now. And people will have the ability to not have sustained burnout over time. They may have moments of it, but it won't be their lived experience throughout their time. And the organizations are a huge part of that. And how we engage with our organizations is a huge part of that. So for educators, this is really important because right now, all you read about is like how burned out everybody is and how hard everything is. And if I were a med student or a resident right now, I'd be like, I don't know if I want to be like you. Like, this isn't great. And so, like, I literally heard that from fellows who are like, I look around and I'm like, how do I not be like them? And so when I think about that, but that's also a lot to put on an attending to be like, you're a role model, like you should figure this out and like figure out how to be okay. And so how do we think about this? And the idea is this is where the coaching starts to come in a little bit, that coaching culture and conversation is like actually talking about these things and normalizing them and getting rid of concepts like work-life balance and like work and life are hard. And I'm constantly juggling all those things. And sharing that journey with people allows you to be humanized and vulnerable and authentic. And you can share what that experience is like. So you start to set that tone of vulnerability and lived experience for those who will follow. But the other piece too is when you share that. So like imagine I'm your attending on service. And my morning starts out with my nanny's late. One of my kids is like, maybe they're sick, maybe they're not. Here's some Tylenol, I'm going to shove it down your throat. And before you go to school. And then I get paged on the way in, and then I have to deal with that. And I show up to rounds, I spill coffee on myself. And I just realized there's a meeting that didn't get changed in my schedule. So I come in hot and I'm pissed. But you don't know any of that. You're the med student or the resident, and you're just like, oh my God, Kerri's pissed. Like one of us must have done something wrong. She hates me. What did I screw up? And so you're on the defensive and you're thinking about that. And then the whole dynamic of the day gets screwed up. But imagine instead, remember that authenticity, vulnerability, lived experience. I show up and I'm like, guys, it's been a morning. Like everything is off. I'm really glad to be here with you guys, but man, I need a minute. You'd all be like, wow, she's got some shit going on. She's part of my French. I'm sorry. She's got some stuff going on. And like, let's give her a minute and then we can get all back together. And so that authenticity and vulnerability is really important, but it's about like that emotional regulation, being honest with yourself, being honest with what you're feeling, sharing that with other people, hearing it and seeing other people. And that's where this all starts to become just part of how we function and act and can really change our experiences. And so as educators, it's important to realize like people are looking at us to role model viability and it's hard and we're all juggling a lot, but really paying attention to like, who am I representing myself as and who am I portraying myself as and how can I be in tune with that and also share that with other people so that they can see that for themselves. And it's important too, I actually missed the most important bullet on the slide, which is that we often put our well-being last in this like lie we tell ourselves that we're doing it for other people and that like we just need to take care of everybody else. And if there's any time left over, we'll take care of ourselves. And actually, that's not true. And that we can serve others the best if we take care of ourselves first. And so that moment of pause or like gathering yourself together or figuring out what you need to be okay in that moment is in service of everyone else. And so that is a mental shift that if we are able to tend to that, we can really change the dynamic for ourselves and for other people. And this starts to create this concept of this culture of well-being, where if we care for ourselves as leaders, as educators, we can care for others in a different way and create an environment, a professional environment where people feel seen and heard and valued and can really push themselves in that psychologically safe space. And this takes intentionality. This takes work. And at the heart of all of this is actually coaching skills. If you look at like, what are the skills required for a well-being centered leader? Almost every single one of them relates to coaching skills. And it's actually been a really fun time for me because this is like all the worlds colliding. And I'm like, I know all the tools to be able to help people with this. But this idea that if we can be the emotional flexibility and vulnerability and authenticity to me is critical to be able to create this for others. And so making sure we're paying attention to our own well-being, committing to the development of others, like in a way that's not just like, here are the goals for your rotation. At the end of this, you'll accomplish it. It's like, what does that mean to be that person who can do that thing? How can I help you see yourself as that? What are the ways that we can commit to your development? And this is a great way where coaching comes in, where it's not necessarily about the goal of the rotation or that year of training, but it's really like, who is that person who can do that? And what about that is important to you? What about that is important to us as a program? Like, why do we care about this? And how can we find that Venn diagram where the stuff you care about and stuff we care about are in that same space, and we're approaching it from that angle? And so it forces us to really be empathic with people and like get inside their heads, assume the best, and give grace often, be curious. Like just yesterday, I was talking with someone and they were like, isn't it so annoying that these people do this? And like they're coming at it like that. And I'm like, let's try for a second to think about like, how did they get there? Like they had to get there somehow. Like, what is the way that, how can we get into their heads and think about how to approach it in a way that they get what they want and we get what we want in this situation? So choosing to be curious about other people's experience, pushing yourself to learn and grow. And so much is building relationships and trust. When you think about like feedback, every like medical education hot topic, and how we give feedback, if you give feedback in a way where you have where you focus on facts, you deepen relationships with the person you're sharing it with, and you do it in a way that's kind, feedback's a conversation. It's not like a thing we both have to go through. If we're just in a relationship with each other and like I get you and I'm choosing to understand you and you trust me that I'm in it for you and your best interest, and we engage in the information in like a really kind, true way that we're working through something together, then it's a thing you're in together. It's not like a pointing. It's not like a negative thing. It becomes a conversation. Now, sometimes it's so much of a conversation. We have to be like, no, so this is feedback, just to be clear. But the idea is that if you can really have that trust and build relationships, the dynamics of teams can completely change. And I mentioned a lot of this authenticity and vulnerability, but the listening is huge. And that is so much of where the coaching comes in. So definitions matter though, because here at UCSF, we know UME coaching happens, clinical coaching. We know that there's coaching for remediation. We know that there's coaching for certain goal setting. There's like a lot of coaching. And actually, the kind of coaching I'm talking about is different from all those things. And so it's important to recognize that what they are doing is important and it is distinct. And so if you approach things from those definitions, it's really helpful. So there's coaching in the moment. Perhaps we're rounding, something comes up, we're kind of talking through it, and I'm working with you, or a topic comes up in a program, like a program director meeting, and you do a little brief moment of coaching. There's coaching over time, like let's set goals for your development and think about how you want to get there. Think about what's important to you, figure out goals together to work towards it. That's more sort of the bucket that we're talking about, this developmental coaching. There's performance coaching, which is a lot of what happens in ORs and procedural based fields, where I'm looking for you to develop a skill. I am the expert in the room. You are learning from me, from that expertise, but we're going to work together to build your skills. And that's more like the sort of like typical sports coaching, like whistle and clipboard kind of coaching. And then there's coaching for remediation, which is important and super nuanced. And you have to be really careful with it because there are some like different rules of engagement with coaching for remediation than other types of coaching. So for the purposes of the rest of this conversation, we're going to talk about that developmental coaching. And that's where I want you to remember this image of a stagecoach. So this is how I teach people to focus on what kind of definition of coaching we're talking about and how to view themselves as coach. And so the idea is that when you are thinking of yourself as a coach in this coaching over time or developmental coaching, you are the vehicle. And that vehicle is on a journey. That journey is taking a person of value, and remember that of value, we'll get back to that. A person of value from where they are as defined by them to where they want to be as defined by them. So the idea is that the coach is not the driver, is not the navigator, is not the one who's deciding those points of where they are and where they want to be. They are simply the space for that journey to happen. And the of value part is a trust right there, is a relationship right there, where you're saying, I believe that this person has lived experience that is tremendously valuable. They are the expert of their life. I always tell our coaches, you may have been a resident, You may have been a resident at this program. You may have been a resident at this in the recent past few years, but you've never been this resident at this program at this time, which means they win. They're the expert of their life. And so that expertise, their lived experience comes into that vehicle and becomes really the information that is shared and drawn from, but also their goals of who they want to be, where they see themselves, how they see themselves, and where they've been. And so the coach creates the space using core coaching skills like how we listen, which is different than how we listen in any other type of relationship, of reflecting back what you've heard and really thinking about helping that person feel seen and heard, but also see and hear themselves in a different way than they may have before. And then the questions help them figure out how they want to move forward from where they are to where they want to be. And rather than just fixing problems, which like we're really good at, right? Like this is what we've been cultivated to do, is solve problems and fix other people's problems. But rather than doing that, it's really about how can we help this person be the best version of themselves and bring that to all of what lay ahead for them. And so it's tapping into who they are at their best. Now, this is challenging for medical educators because we love to eliminate weaknesses. But the idea is actually like weaknesses won't matter as much if we're focusing on strengths. If we can help people connect with who they are at their best and what their strengths are, they can bring those strengths to challenges to overcome weaknesses. So rather than eliminating strengths, let's cultivate the best of this person. And so that's a lot about what that coaching conversation is. And so the idea is that I have one piece of bad news, which is that I cannot change the fact that you will all experience stressors in your life. Most of you already have, and I promise you, you will again. And we can't change the fact that our trainees will go through stressors, right? That's part of the experience. What we can change is the struggle. And so coaching can create an environment, a relationship, a conversation where you can reduce the struggle that one experiences during stress. And so the idea is that you have a stressor, and then you insert this coaching dynamic where you process your experiences. You almost like zoom out and like look at it from a different lens. Think about, what are my thoughts about this? What are my feelings about this? And then sort of use these different frameworks where it's what is right about me? What is right about my experiences? What feels good about the work that I'm doing? How can I bring that to this challenge? What's like really important to me about this? What's intrinsically motivating me to move forward? What's most important for me to focus on? And what do I have as my resources? How many of you have had experience where you're super stressed, time feels like you have none of it, you don't know what to do, and you close the door and bury yourself deeper? You like stop leaning on other people and you're like, I just needed some time to get through this. But rather, what if we leaned on the resources that we have and didn't just go it alone during a tough time, but actually engage with those resources and started to feel the ways our organization is supporting us and become more part of a community through our stressor. And so as you do that, you don't just get through it and definitely wouldn't suffer, but rather what we see is that stressors then become things that we can learn from, grow from, thrive through, and move forward, having learned from these experiences, having them shape us, but not take away from us. And so that's really that coaching dynamic is what happens in that middle piece. So some of it is simply choosing to focus on the positive. And this I find so fascinating. Like humans love to focus on the negative. But I will even very proactively be like, tell me a good thing that happened. And people will still tell me a bad thing that happened. And I'm like, no, so remember, it's the good thing. And they're like, oh, right. I mean, do you really want to hear that? And I'm like, yes, I do. And so there's actually like a lot of really cool data that shows with teams, if you share positive stories, it changes your curiosity. It changes how you think together. You work more creatively, more efficiently, and you work in new and different ways than you had before. And so I will encourage particularly procedurally based fields to say, like, when you're scrubbing in, when you have that moment while you're waiting for that patient to be brought into the OR, or when you're sort of like, when you have that few moments of downtime, rather than like talking about all the things you have to do on your to-do list, which like obviously you need to run the list, but like if you feel like you have a minute, rather than doing that or talking about what's annoying about something, stop and be like, hey, so give me a good story about your weekend, or like, what's the coolest case that you had recently? Or share an experience of your own. And so, and watch what happens. Watch how the dynamic changes as you do that. And then this concept of intrinsic motivation, we mentioned this earlier. And this is one of the challenges I mentioned. Remediation coaching is very nuanced because you can't coach somebody who doesn't want to be coached. And if you're being coached about things that you don't actually care about, it's not really coaching. And so you want to be coached about things that really matter to you. And if the thing that needs to change isn't something that matters to you, figuring out like, how can I make this matter to me? Why is this important? Like, what's my deeper why? And that's when you disarm. That's when the frustrations start to melt away and you get really focused. And so connecting with what intrinsically motivates you on any challenge, and this is hard, like promotion is a great example. I don't know what promotion is like here, but it's not the most amazing process at Harvard. And so like for me, I was like really resenting having to do the promotions process to go up, which hopefully will happen in the next few months. And I just like couldn't make it happen. And I was annoyed. I was angry. Why should I have to sit here and do this and like prove myself and, all the narrative you probably all can imagine. And then something came up and I wasn't eligible for it. And I was like, damn, all right. Well, that's but it wasn't enough. It still didn't do it. And then somebody who trained after me got promoted. And I was like, all right, it's time. I'm doing this. And it was funny. The competition is what intrinsically motivated me, not like competition against her, like against myself. Like, okay, Kerri, other people are figuring this out. Like kick it into gear, let go, like just focus on what's important. But then the third piece so like the fire was lit, but I still wasn't like ready to create all this time for it. But then as some of you may have heard, our hospitals are merging together. And which means new bosses, new leaders, new lots of things. And suddenly I was like, oh my gosh, my boss loves me. My boss knows everything about me. And if I need to be promoted, he is the person who would know how wonderful I am to be promoted. He's the one that's going to put me up. And what if he's not the same? I need to like kick this into gear and make this happen while I still know who my boss is. And that was like the third thing. And then suddenly I was like, I am getting promoted. And I was like excited about it. And so it needs to be something that lights your fire. It needs to be something that gets you excited. And so if you're trying to get a resident to learn a skill, or you're trying to get someone to care about a project, like you can't force them into it. It's really thinking about like, why is this important to you? Or what is important to you? And how can this align with you? Or maybe how can you let this go? Like maybe how to find your no. And then thinking about people at their best. I talked about getting away from eliminating weaknesses and getting into cultivating strengths. If you imagine, so this is a true story of when I was on service and an intern, I came in the morning, not covered in coffee and pissed off. I came in like ready to round and like no notes were done. Like it was a mess. It was a tough night, clearly, for this person. And I took one look at her and I was like, this is not going to be a good morning. And so I was like, hey, how was last night? And she's like, it wasn't good. And I was like, what do you need? And she's like, I need 5 minutes to like collect my thoughts. And I need us to like just kind of figure it out together this morning. And I was like, sure, no problem. So she didn't need me to tell her she was unprepared and disorganized. She knew. And I like deflated that right from the jump. And it was pretty clear as we went through, like patient number 2 was kind of starting to morph with patient number 4. And I was like, you know what? Let's get away from the traditional presentations. Let's just all go see the patients together. And so we saw the patients together because it wasn't about like performative at that point. Like we just had to take care of patients. And so we then finished rounds and she was like, you hate me. And I was like, I don't hate you. And I was like, I think we can both agree that was like a pretty tough night. I was like, what happened? And she's like, they were just pages. They were just pages coming at me left and right. And all the patients at the floor at the same time. And this one didn't speak English and this one didn't speak at all. And I'm trying to get records from the nursing home. And she's like, it was chaotic. And I was like, okay, you are an MD PhD from a very reputable institution. I'm willing to bet you have been busy before. And she's like, yeah, I mean, when I was she gave me some story of like a time in her life she was very busy. And I was like, so what did you do then? How did you stay organized then? How did you stay on top of all the things you had to do? And she's like, I made lists. And I was like, all right, so how can we make lists here? And she's like, I don't know, my lists aren't working. And I was like, so maybe we need to go about it. And so we basically just like troubleshot, like, how could she think about when her pager's going off, keeping track of the non-urgent but still important, while still focusing on the important and more urgent. And like the next call night was a little bit better. The next one was a little bit better. And then she had like a killer call night and we celebrated it. And so when we think about this, like there was a lot of different ways that we could have approached that call. But the idea is like, let's think about what has worked for you before, build your confidence around that and use it. She didn't need me to tell her she was disorganized. She knew full well for herself, but rather we built a relationship where she knew I was in it for her, but really for the patients. Like it wasn't about whether she was good or bad. It was like, we got to take care of these people. And so changing the dynamic where you're having those conversations and you're really seeing people where they're at is a lot of what changes, and building confidence along the way. And I mentioned the social supports, like we bury when we're busy. And residents in particular tend not to lean on the resources that, how many times have, like, as an attending, you have talked to a resident and been like, why didn't you go to this office or ask this person for help? It's like, oh, I didn't know that existed. And you're like, oh my gosh, these resources are here. So another piece is helping people learn how to trust the resources that exist. And that is a learned behavior. That is not just something people naturally fall into, because it actually takes time to learn this stuff, and like time in a place to learn this stuff. And then lastly, thinking about how do we focus on what's most important to us. Many times in our lives, we use a lot of energy and a lot of time on things that are not most important. And as we do so, our tank is getting emptied. And there will always be things that drain our tank, whether we try to engage with them or not. They will always be there. Like, just think about the world around us right now, right? But there are always things that can fill our tank. But that one we have to choose to engage. It's not just going to naturally, like happy things aren't just going to naturally be filling me up. You have to stop and take the moments to engage with them, which takes time and effort and intentionality. And so if we can commit to stop doing things that are not serving us, that are not serving our energy, that are not giving us anything and just draining us more, if we can give less energy or different energy to those things, when we can't stop all, there's some stuff you just have to do, but how can we shift our energy? And then choose that whatever pieces we have left, choosing proactively to engage in things that fill our tank will be what then allows us to be that best version of ourselves. And starting to have those conversations of like, is this serving me? Is this the hill I want to die on? Like, is this conversation, is this relationship one that actually is giving to me? Or is it one that's taking away? And shifting how we engage in those. So I mentioned there are 3 basic skills. And the single most important skill that changes coaching from any other type of conversation you have is in the listening. Now, as doctors, we listen in perhaps not the most effective ways. But we listen in ways that serve our purposes. And I don't mean to say that judgmentally. What I mean to say is, like, when I walk in a room as a primary care doctor, I have to understand, like, okay, what is going on with this person? What do they need? What's wrong with them? How can I help them? That's my job in that room. When I mentor somebody, my job is to think, who is this person? What do they need from me? How can I help them? How can I set them on their way to be successful? As a coach, I need to listen for them, not for me, because my job is not to fix them. We talked about that earlier. My job is not to have all the answers. They already have them. My job is to help them figure that out for themselves. And so it involves me really deeply listening, but listening actually for their purposes as opposed to my own, because I actually have no purpose. I mean, I have a purpose. I have no need to do anything with the information other than to show it to them. So I'm actually listening to them in a really empathic level of listening, where I'm trying to understand them. I'm trying to put myself in their shoes. I'm trying to understand their experience. And then when you can do that, when you listen like that and reflect that back to them, the number of times I will reflect literally exactly what a person just said, and they'll be like, wow, you're right. And I'm like, that you just said that. I just said what you just said. We often don't even hear the words that are coming out of our mouth, because oftentimes we either haven't said them out loud, or we haven't said them out loud like that. A lot of times it's stuff that's been kind of rummaging around in there, but when you stop and give yourself time and space to talk about it, it comes out. And then as a coach, when you can show that to someone with a reflection, it allows them to kind of take a step back and then see it and hear it for themselves in a new and different way. And when you listen and reflect like that, you then are able to sort of peel off the layers, if you will. Like whatever was said, there's something behind that. And when you offer a reflection and let them keep going as an invitation to tell you more, they go deeper. Then you listen and reflect, they go deeper. And eventually you get to whatever's at the root of it. And so when you get to what's at the root of it, that's where your questions become really powerful. So you can say, all right, so tell me about that. Like, what would that look like if that were really going well? And how might you get there? So questions that really help them explore the future, almost as if they've already solved it, and then think about how to get themselves there. So you listen on behalf of the person you're coaching. You're curious on behalf of the person you're coaching. And everything, all the energy, all the experience is really directed toward them. So what I tell coaches is like, imagine you're the vehicle and you're listening and you're like, oh yeah, that happened to me too. Like, let me tell you what I did. You just grab the wheel. If you are like, oh, don't worry, like this happens to all the residents, like you're going to be okay. You just grab the wheel. If you start asking clarifying questions, like, wait, so which rotation was that on? And like, who was the attending there? You just grab the wheel. And anytime you grab the wheel, it's about you and your energy and not about them and theirs. And so trying to always keep them in the driver's seat is the goal. And people will be like, but what if I have good ideas? It's like, your advice is not as important as the advice that you can help them find for themselves. Because say I tell that resident, I know what you should do. I think what you should do is this. And they'll be like, oh, that's a good idea. Because maybe I have the exact same experience, or maybe I know exactly what they actually should do. Then they go off and do it, but they've learned absolutely nothing about themselves or the process. And so that's not actually usable to them unless they have the exact same situation again. But instead, if I said, well, what do you think, what about this is important? What might you try? How could you make that happen? And they come up with something. Could be the exact same thing I just came up with. But now they're trusting their thinking process. They can use that in other circumstances, and they start to believe that they can actually solve their own problems. If I overly, like, don't worry, that happens to all the residents. Like, you're like, oh, okay, it's okay. You walk out, that resident walks out and they're like, yeah, but this is still my problem. So I haven't actually reassured them anything beyond that conversation. But if you can help them find their own internal validation, find their own reassurance, that's when you can really change that dynamic. And so that's what I mean when I say it really transforms conversations, because it shifts it to, I'm a person who knows it all and gives you the advice, to you actually know what you need, and let's just create the space for you to find that. And if you need me, I'll be here. Like if you can't find the advice, like I'll pipe up. I promise. I won't let you like suffer. But really, you can solve this. We can do this together. So there's a lot of really good coaching questions out there, and people will ask me, like, what are some good coaching questions? But actually, if you are simply listening and reflecting, you will hear everything you need to know to be able to follow up with the coaching question when you get to that root, which is one of those like annoying, like psychotherapy kind of answers. We're like, just listen and you'll find the way. But it's really actually true, because your curiosity will be so on fire that you'll have so many questions right there. It's actually containing the curiosity that is some of the hard parts of coaching. And Sarah, I think you'll share all these slides so people can have this. So I'll share a little bit of data, but I'm not going to share a lot because I'd love to hear your questions. But we've been doing this kind of coaching at MGH since 2012. Our trainees in several different departments, we started out just in internal medicine and then spread throughout the health system. But our trainees are paired up with a faculty coach who undergoes 3 hours of training a year and has a curriculum to support them. And they engage in conversations just like we've talked about today. And the faculty get training, they get the manuals, they get videos, and the training is a lot of practice because so much of this is very different. So it's not like talking at them. It's like, all right, let's throw you in and let you practice this and then see what that felt like. And people be like, oh God, I was such a bad listener. Or like, I totally forgot to feel like I asked questions that were for me. People get to feel what that's like and kind of stumble through it. And we mismatch people intentionally with someone outside of their field. so that you can like bear it all and not worry about seeing me in a job interview or me being your attending next time on rounds. But the cool thing, it's just like I gave you the examples of how I act as an attending on rounds. People end up coaching everybody. Like it's like a thing you start doing and you can't turn it off. And so it starts to create a coaching culture. But for the purpose of this program, our coaches are assigned to someone outside of their field. And each meeting is sort of follows a particular structure of like, how am I finding you today? Tell me a good story. Remember, we're talking about the positives and sort of getting creative. And then there's an exercise that's linked with each meeting. And then the resident and the coach, or the fellow and the coach, will set a big picture goal of like, what does success look like for you this year? So people can start to envision their own success and move towards it, because no one's setting goals for me now as an attending. It's up to me to figure out what being successful looks like. And so starting to actually build the conversation. So no resident should be like, I don't know, am I doing how I'm supposed to be doing? Like, is someone going to tell me if I stink at this? They can actually start to consider for themselves, am I doing how I want to be doing? Am I developing into the person I want to be? And then what are the goals that are going to support me in the short term for me to get there? And so we've learned a lot. I like just dumped all the data onto the slide, which was fun and all. But what I did do is on the next slide is I have all the numbers so that when they share the slides, you can like go to this. And this is just my research. There's like lots of other people doing really cool stuff about coaching. But the idea is, what have we learned? If you set up people with coaching relationships, they set a lot of goals. We don't naturally set goals in training, as crazy as that sounds. I think we'd all love to think that people are doing that, but either we are setting them and it's like on a form at the end of the year or the beginning of the year, and it's like not goals that actually are intrinsically necessarily motivating us or moving us towards a vision. It's actually goals for the sake of goals. You set people up with coaching, and goal setting like triples. Nearly everyone is setting goals. It improves well-being, decreases burnout, decreases emotional exhaustion, improves well-being, improves fulfillment. This concept of self-valuation, which is like, if you think about like how might you measure a growth mindset, that's what self-valuation is. It improves intolerance of uncertainty, improves resilience and coping behaviors and reflection behaviors. It's creating an environment where the things that I mentioned are actually happening. And these are just coaches who have a few hours of training. These aren't even like certified coaches. We also learn like who does better with coaching. And it seems like people who are really burned out have a lot to gain from coaching. That's like pretty intuitive. But actually thinking about the mechanism by which that happens, it's often through this practice of reflection and goal setting. But we also learn that the better we train our coaches, the better the experience is. So it's not just like, let's create an hour for people to talk about things. There is a lot of like really digging into the training with the coaches changes it. There's a dose dependent manner. So if a resident shows up once, they don't get as much out of it as if they show up 3, 4, 5 times. So thinking about really engagement in the service, in the offering is important. We have some data that shows coaching actually improves self-reported medical errors. And it's actually that mechanism of that is the intolerance of uncertainty. So if you create an environment to talk about something that you think might be a medical error, you either confirm that it was and talk about it, or let it go and realize that it wasn't. And that's a really important, when we think about what really drives burnout and frustration in people, it's, did I screw up? Was it me? Am I the one that would like, if I did better, would that patient have done better? And so creating a space to actually be able to talk about those things in a very open, safe space changes people's perception of whether they had a medical error or not. And it changes coaches, improve burnout, improve professional fulfillment, improved engagement. So coaches are changing, trainees are changing. And fascinatingly, we did a study where we actually paid coaches at MGH. I don't pay them. We do a lot to like support them in other ways. But we asked them in the study, if the money runs out and we can't pay you, will you still do this? And nearly all of them said that they would. So this is also a sign, like for any trainee in the room who's like, the attendings like are so busy and they don't like, when attendings are paired up with a trainee and it's a meaningful relationship, everybody really wants it. Like people want relationships. Sometimes we just need to put them into place to make it happen. or get them in the door. And it's like anything else. Like if you even think about like those of you who are like, should I go in person or should I not? Or should I go meet with that person or go to that event or not? Like everything in your body is telling you not to. And then you go and you're like, oh, that was so fun. I'm so glad I did that. And then it's like, then the next day comes up and it's like constantly weighing those things. And there's no one right answer, but it's sort of that idea. Okay. And then there's like a lot of these other data slides, but basically big picture, we learned you can do this virtually, you can do this in person, and it doesn't have to be someone in your hospital. So we did this in a professional society and it worked great. And so having people separated in other parts of the country in other hospitals still worked great. We did a study where we targeted the curriculum around the outcomes we were looking for, and we found those outcomes could change. So we learned we could take a group and tweak the curriculum to actually meet their needs, and coaching could serve it in that way. So that was a really fun study. And we're actually just about to publish results that the impact on coaches over time is also dose dependent. So the more years you do this as a coach, the more you're getting out of it. So we talked about a lot of these things, about really how to use coaching in different ways. But big picture, if you change how you listen, if you choose to just try and see the difference and try to quiet that voice that's just ready to start talking, that will really change the dynamic. And just notice how you hear things and what you're hearing. And when you don't jump in to ask a question or clarify something, how does that conversation change? When you don't jump in to give advice, what changes? I'd be so curious to hear what happens if you start practicing asking for positive stories in different opportunities throughout your days with teams or one-on-one with learners. And I think really considering for the people that you're working with, like starting to ask questions like, how do you want people to see you? Who is the person you're trying to become? What are the goals that support that person? Who is your best self? Like really questions that pull people away from any current situation and more towards that future desired self or that future desired outcome really transforms that conversation. And I'm just going to skip all that stuff because I want you guys to be able to ask questions. But the idea is that thinking about well-being as opposed to just wellness, focusing on well-being as opposed to just burnout, and starting to think about how coaching can be really infused into how we build relationships, how we communicate with each other, how we listen to each other, how we function in teams, starts to change culture. And as we change culture, we can start to change who we are as individuals and others' experiences of us. And really then it start that ripple effect throughout the organization. It's like my biggest academic interest right now is the ripple effect, but it really starts to change how we're experiencing each other. And what that does for patients and their experience of it is really, and patients are important, and we are important. And so if we can figure out how to change our own experiences and also change theirs, that to me is really where that magic is. So I have my email address up here. I'm always happy to answer any questions. And then here's the CME information, Patrick. I told you I wouldn't forget that. Thank you very much. Oh, yes, question. Thank you.
Any data about faculty? So
I do, yes. So anyone on Zoom, the question was any data about coaching faculty and retention. So at MGH data, I didn't show you is that we have a coaching program for faculty using certified physician coaches who are their peers, who are so trained and certified as coaches and then coach our faculty. And we had like an incredible reduction in burnout and improvement of fulfillment and improvement in likelihood to leave and retention. So it really does, everybody worries like, well, if we coach people, are they all going to leave? And what I said to our leadership is I was like, a few people will leave and that's not coaching's fault. And those people are probably going to leave anyway. But what we saw in the qualitative data was I was ready to retire. I was ready to cut back. I was ready to leave. And this made me remember what's important about this for me, why I value my time here. And that sense of agency of like, I'm not stuck. I can actually like find my way forward here, was seemed to be at the root of a lot of it. And for our coaches too. So our coaches were like, their numbers were wildly improved also. So they become a really valuable resource in the organization. Yes. Yes. Okay. So for anybody at home, what about the impact is from just the time and space to process and reflect versus the actual meaningful connection between two people? There is some data in the coaching literature, and there's actually like there's coaching apps and there's like AI coaching, and there's a lot of other cool things that are coming out. And so what you'll find, my hunch is that in the beginning there's just a thing that happens of just like, wow, I took this time to think about this. Like you could picture journaling, right? If you just journaled, there's like a benefit in the beginning, but unless there's like a reason to keep doing it or something that's fueling that, then that benefit probably drops over time. Which is where I think the connection piece really does become important. And there's the connection, and just like there's a person here who cares about me, but then there's also, and I think that there's like that's a big part of it actually. But then there's also, I'm connected with a person who has the skills to keep pulling this out of me. So it is those two things together that like really magnify the impact, I think, as opposed to just like I meet with somebody like I actually did a study where I taught faculty some basic coaching skills and then paired people up, and people liked it. It was nice, but it wasn't coaching, and people didn't want to keep it going. It was like I would rather just have coffee with my friend, who I haven't seen in a while, than this random person assigned to me. So it's not just a person I'm connected with through this program. It's that person has skills that keep that reflection going. Yeah.
I like that you talk about a lot of the programs. Wondering, you definitely gave about how to do this part of your clinical work, but I'm wondering in terms of like the time, manufacturing that, how long do you think in terms of actual budget, even getting people, how long do you really need to?
Yeah.
Like get somebody started in the middle of it.
Yes. So like the positive story example, like situation, I would often do that. I'm not in an OR, but I would do it precepting, like waiting for everybody to like show up and drop their stuff and like, rather than just like gripe about the day. So that takes like 2 minutes. That's not a long time. The story I gave you about the post-call intern who was a hot mess that day, the conversation about like, when were you busy? How did that work? Happened from the call room to the elevator. So it doesn't have to be a long time. When I was the primary care program director at MGH, I would take 5 minutes at the end of program meetings to do like the visioning and like, we're going to put away, because you do have to be cognizant of the different hats you wear. So I'd be like, all right, we're going to take 5 minutes now at the end of this meeting and do some coaching. Like, I want to hear like, who do you really want to be? Like, who's that best vision of yourself? So that'll be like 5 minutes. So these can be quick conversations. Typically, I design the coaching exercises that our coaches do to be about 20 minutes. So the whole meeting is about 45 minutes to an hour. That like coaching exercise is about 20 to 25. Okay. Oh, yes.
Kerri, Palamara, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
I feel like I learned something new. It's another world of music, so I'm sure this was very impactful. For the faculty who are joining us for the workshop, we will be in Mission Hall 2103. And thank you in advance for your time. And we thank everyone else for being here and being present and being engaged. And we look forward to seeing you in May when we'll have our celebration for medical education, and we'll get to celebrate the amazing educational work happening in our department. Have a beautiful day. Thank you.
I just went to I mean, I don't have a spread, but I just like kind of, I was like, I'm just gonna buy that. I was like, this is fun, just talking. So, I'm good, I'm good.
Did you get any?
I didn't even, I'm okay.
Science.